This is Katy Irving, who has no slides because she's a legend and does not need them. That's no disrespect to anyone else. It's just her ability to wing it, and that's why I love her.
Thanks, Anna. And I'm going to put a timer on because, like you all, I needed Simon in the corner of the room with the timer. Yeah, Hannah asked me to do 5 minutes on a day in the life of a behavioral scientist, so kind of what I do day in and day out. I asked for a little bit of help from Claude, the LLM, to help me kind of plan this talk. I just put in some recent projects and they timed up the talk, so hopefully we will be right on schedule. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm an American person. But I have lived in the UK since 2006, so I'm pretty well embedded in the UK. I work for a company called Healthcare Research Worldwide, or HRW. We are a pharmaceutical healthcare market research company, so that means we conduct interviews with doctors and patients to figure out how people make decisions. I stumbled into healthcare market research. I studied quantitative communications research for my undergraduate and master's degree, and I did my master's dissertation on Grey's Anatomy and House, the television medical dramas. Yes, gender and communication in those, and so staggered into market research in healthcare because I had experience with Grey's Anatomy and House. But I loved it there, and I still love it, and I've worked in that industry basically since graduating from my master's degree. And in 2016, I co-founded a behavioral science consultancy called HRW Shift, which I oversee and has been really successful and grown to a 15-person multidisciplinary behavioral science team, which is really exciting. So now I do behavioral science day in and day out, surrounded by people like yourselves with really good backgrounds in behavioral science. So my days are really diverse, and really no 2 days are the same, and that's one of the things I love about my job and working in this industry. But I've got some examples of common projects and how a day can be structured. So I work on up to 15 or 20 projects at any one time, but they're all at different stages in their iteration, and I'm collaborating with a lot of colleagues in various departments in research and data science, so I'm not actively working on that many tasks at any one time, but I have to balance a lot of different things. So in the morning, first thing I do bright and early is I go to the gym to try and clear my head a little bit. And then when I get to the office, I'm going to start on a variety of different tasks. So an example might be I start in the morning with a communications audit. So for example, we are working with a client who is developing a campaign in menopause targeted at people with menopause, and they are developing a communications advertising campaign, and me and my team are reviewing that. So like Patrick was talking about in terms of having a behavioral science mindset, we'll look at that and look at some of the ways that they are framing their messaging, the visuals, and we might do what we call a hive mind, where several of us kind of get together from various disciplines and look at those materials and identify what's working well and less well. Now, when I was preparing this talk, I was like, well, how can we make this relevant to the hackathon? So I've kind of tailored it to think about, okay, what are some of the tasks that I do day in and day out that you've been demonstrating over the last couple of days? And in that, it was looking at things like the cognitive load of the materials. How simple are they? How easy are they to understand? The kind of imagery and color cues. How are the readers designed to take action on the things, and what kind of nudges are present, and are they working towards the brand's overall objectives, or are they cluttering the message? So that's the kind of thing that I might start off my morning doing. Then mid-morning, let's say I go into looking more at a healthcare professional campaign. A lot of our work is with healthcare professionals, and in this case I'm looking at a brand perception for a breast cancer drug. So they have the best data, but they're not sure why sometimes they're not the top pick amongst oncologists prescribing in breast cancer. And in this case, we're applying behavioral frameworks to identify some of the key priorities and kind of help the client decide what action they can take. And the kind of learning from this, and the thing that you guys have been doing over the last couple of days, is that often our clients underestimate the role of some of the basic things, like trying to jump straight to persuading people, but skip some of the points around comprehension, around communication, and they sometimes really underestimate the value of things like logistical friction that might get in the way of their users. Then after lunch in the early afternoon, I might move on to something like communications testing. So again, we do market research, so we would put potential communications in front of users and see how well they're working or not working. In this case, we had a behaviorally reframed text message study for a bunch of patients with a kidney disease. So this was a great opportunity to help a company actually connect with the patients. And on this project, the skills that I was having to use was having calls with a lot of senior stakeholders, including people in the medical team, so communicating between audiences that don't necessarily speak the same language and trying to get them on the same page. And also the importance of testing. So like you all have done, we did, in this case, mock-ups on Canva so that when we were testing with users, they could see it as though it were a real text message, even though we weren't running like an in-practice test. Then mid-afternoon, I do some strategic activities, like we've got an upcoming webinar series where I'm working with a couple colleagues to give a webinar on how we can try and help people be better at predicting the future and how we can try and predict the future in the questions we ask people in market research. So thinking about the content for that and some of the kind of literature around future predictions. And also an upcoming podcast. We have a podcast on patient adherence. Our podcast is on behavioral science and healthcare market research, but we've got an episode on patient adherence coming up. So planning for some of that kind of content. And the kind of skill there is about sometimes you kind of have to give stuff away for free in order to kind of help raise your profile in the industry, and thinking about giving people stuff that's actually useful for them. And so like when you're marketing to people, how can you kind of frame your offering in a way that it's speaking to their core needs? Finally, thinking about kind of the later afternoon, this might be more around some of the market research methodologies. So one for the AI folks and machine learning folks in the room, we are looking at a study in depression where we're trying to get a sense of how doctors treat patients with a couple of different profiles in depression. We're using AI avatars to bring those patients to life for healthcare professionals so that they're reacting to a more realistic profile. And writing behaviorally informed content for that proposal, and planning my schedule for the next day ahead. So there, we're looking at things where you have to kind of use skills like kind of satisficing, being happy with 80% of your effort because you're managing so many tasks within any given day, and also just generally prioritization and planning. So thinking about what is ahead and how we can use technology in a meaningful way rather than just a gimmick for the sake of it. So in conclusion, I work on a lot of diverse projects and activities, from doctors to patients, from early stage to late stage, a variety of different business objectives, and the role is really dynamic. And the role of behavioral science has very many different types of applications. So being able to kind of be fast, adaptable, and good at task switching, which you've all kind of demonstrated over the last couple of days that you are. So really similar skills to what you've demonstrated in this hackathon. That's a day in the life of a behavioral scientist. And Claude lied because that was actually 7 minutes and 55 seconds, and they said it was going to be 5. So. Not my fault. Claude's fault. Any questions while we wait for the judges to return? Getting medical professionals involved in the research side of things. So day in and day out, we're conducting research with healthcare professionals. There's a lot of self-motivation for them to want to come and kind of learn about some of the latest drug developments, because you're often dealing with very early stage products before they've been released to the market. So there's kind of that incentive. They also like being consulted for their expertise. But there is a bit of a respondent crisis across market research where there's so much market research going on that there's respondent fatigue and they don't want to partake. So it's an issue that we're looking at across the industry, especially to get a diverse representative population.
Thank you, Katie.